2021 Planning Commission meeting. My name is Chris Ramey and I'm the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the Planning Commission to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. Today, our meeting will begin with a public comment session, followed by a work session on the Middle Housing Code amendments. There are several housekeeping announcements and instructions related to the meeting format that I need to take care of first. Thank you for your patience while I work my way through them. Anyone wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the webcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by following the access instructions listed on the agenda for this meeting. For those who join the meeting via computer device or phone, your microphone, webcam, and phone are automatically muted when you enter the meeting as an attendee. If you wish to participate during the public comment portion of the meeting and haven't already done so, please raise your virtual hand now to join the speaker's queue in one of two ways. For those viewing the meeting on a computer, laptop, or other device, click once on the hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, press *9. When public comment begins, our meeting moderator will announce the next two speakers at a time. When it's your turn, the moderator will announce your name and unmute your microphone. Public comment is limited to 10 minutes, so your time to speak will be based on the number of people signed up to speak. Finally, I want to thank everyone again for their patience, flexibility, and good humor as we work through this new virtual meeting format. As always, feel free to contact staff if there is testimony you were not able to provide or wish to get to us in a different manner. Agenda item A, public comment. Do we have anyone who wishes to provide public comment today? I don't see any hands raised. Do we have any telephone attendees? Okay, so we will move on to agenda item B, which is a work session on the Middle Housing Code Amendments Update, staffed by Terry Harding. Good morning, Terry. Thank you for being with us today.
Morning. Before we get started on middle housing,
I think you're muted, Terry.
Oh.
I could hear Terry just fine.
I heard her.
I could hear her. Can you hear us?
So it's just me that can't hear Terry.
But now Terry is muted.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
A little Zoom fun for your Monday morning. I was just saying, before we get started on middle housing, Alyssa has a short item to present.
Thank you, Terry. And I am going to share my screen. Oh boy. Tell me if I should do, okay, never mind. You're going to help me out here because you are our PowerPoint professional after all of this. Tell me what you see.
Yeah, I see your presentation. Just go to the slideshow play button.
Okay, so this is good. All right. Today it is Commissioner Borowski's last meeting as a Eugene Planning Commissioner. So get out your Kleenexes. We are celebrating his 8 years of service and leadership. So two full terms on the Planning Commission. And, and he epitomizes community service, doesn't he? I mean, if you think about all of the things that Commissioner Borowski has done, in addition to being on the Planning Commission, he has been an active board member and past chair of his neighborhood association. He spent 7 years on the budget committee. He's been on the city's street repair review board. He's been on Travel Lane County board. He is active in the chamber. He's been on the city's community development block grant committee. He's also a part of our Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee, and he has served as the U of O Community Liaison for the Planning Commission. And right now he's doing double duty also as a commissioner for being on the board of eWeb. And so obviously community service is a big value of I'm going to call you John for this one. And, we've just been so fortunate to have you as part of the Planning Commission these last 8 years. So when you started, this was your crew with, we've got a little more diversity since then, but this was a great Planning Commission that you started with in 2013. And
Alyssa?
Yes.
It's not advancing. I think you need to press the play button for the slideshow.
Oh. Shoot.
Or you could stop sharing and try again.
Okay.
There's a couple of windows open.
Yeah, I've seen that. Okay, I'm gonna try that again.
Now it's there now.
Oh, okay. That's crazy. Do you see it in
Alyssa, we see your whole presentation at the same time. We don't see one slide, so we see the whole.
Oh, you're seeing that. Okay, hold on. So it's being funky. Hold on. What do you see now?
Same thing.
Okay. Terry, how did you fix this last time?
You might have to stop sharing and start again, but we are on the correct slide. I think you just need to get it into slideshow.
Okay, it's funny because it's on my 3 screens. It's on it. I'm right on 2 screens, so I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, then you can change display. It's under view options.
Okay.
Up there on the left. I don't have it going, so I'm not sure.
No, you know what? And I'm going to turn off. Okay, it is just not. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And then Terry, here's my question for you. Do I want to share the PowerPoint program or my second screen?
That depends how your screens are set up, but I would share the program. Jeff on his camera.
That's what I have. Okay. So
yay!
Now what do you see?
Well, same as I saw before.
Same thing.
Dang it.
Try it the other way.
And you're not seeing, okay, hold on.
We're seeing the 2013 commission.
Oh, you are?
And then your window to the side.
Okay.
And that works. I mean, that works. You can just
That's all you're gonna get right now because for some reason, Jeff's gonna help me. I have some technical assistance here, thankfully. I knew this was gonna happen.
You have way too many screens.
I have too many screens, so hold on.
Okay. Wow, this is intimidating.
John, this is what happens in 2021. I can turn off the screen.
That's fine. So go to share screen. Where is your presentation? Where is your Zoom even?
I don't even know. I've lost it.
Now you know why the meeting's going till 2:30.
It's up in there.
This is ridiculous. Okay.
Okay, so go to share screen. We are gonna do it just the cheap and easy way. So go to screen 1, hit share,
And then just gonna go
and
on
then
the screen.
yeah, there you go.
All right. Yay. All right. Thanks for Jeff for being down the hall. All right. We're going to go back to 2013 from when Commissioner Borowski first started. Thank you guys for your patience. This is why I hate sharing my screen. So as you know, you started 2013. This was your crew. And I think some of them may even be watching us today, unless they got tired of me trying to share my screen. So, and you have been, I did not count how many meetings and hearings you have been to, other than to know it was a lot in 8 years. And, you know, most of your meetings, thankfully for you, you know, 6+ years worth, you got to do in person down in either the slow room or in City Hall. But the last 1.5 years, you've had the pleasure of being on Zoom. And there is a picture of our first Zoom meeting for the Planning Commission. That was pretty exciting. You've also been, you know, a really big part of the Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee, representing the Planning Commission there. Got to look like a natural with the microphone in your hand. There in the pandemic, of course, again, a lot of Zoom meetings that you had to endure along with the rest of the crew. You also served as co-chair on ETAC. and have been very instrumental. Thankfully that you don't have to leave ETAC just because you're leaving the Planning Commission. We still need you there. And then over your tenure, there have been you've touched a lot of different really big projects. And I just want to name a few of them. Probably one of the biggest was the Envision Eugene adoption package, including the adoption of a UGB that included an expansion for an industrial and parks and, oh my gosh, I just forgot, and a school out in the Bethel area. Also included, new chapters of our comprehensive plan, and there was a host of other plan amendments, code changes that went along with that. And that was a really big, long-standing, probably the entire time you were on the Planning Commission, we were working on pieces of that. Also the downtown riverfront, the transformation of the e-website, from the early code amendment process, and you can actually see now, you can see that coming to fruition now, which is really exciting. The Eugene's transportation system plan, the clear and objective code amendments. Obviously, you've been continuing to work on growth monitoring, middle housing. You've got your stamp on there. There's been another, and also a number of land use appeals. There are 3. I did do a little history research here. The first appeal you got to work on was the Benson zone change. You might remember that. That might have been your first meeting, in fact. So that should have been really fun. And you stuck around. So thank you. You've also been through, I think, 3 iterations or so of Laurel Ridge, starting in 2013. With the Rest Haven site, there was a Metro Plan Amendment zone change, and then later on a CUP for affordable housing. So you were involved in both of those appeals. And then Oakley, which I lost track of the number of meetings and remands that you were part of that. But that also started in 2013. So some of these have really continued, and I'm happy to say that I believe all of those are in progress at this point, and we'll eventually see, something happening there. A couple other notable ones are Lombard and Capitol Hill as well. And then just a couple, more recently, there was the digital sign code amendments. There's been some single family code amendments, ADUs, obviously River Road, Santa Clara, and urban reserves. You've been part of those conversations. Just a lot of projects have come your way and that you've, provided us outstanding input on. Here's the crew from the Planning Commission from when you made your recommendation on the urban growth boundary adoption package. Again, that was in May of 2017, and that was an enormous amount of work that the Planning Commission put forth in terms of reviewing all of those amendments and findings and making our work stronger. And again, here's our 2021 commission, which is lovely to see here. And that'll change next month, but we've just been so thankful to have you as part of the Planning Commission. And when I think about you, there are kind of 3 things that come to my mind immediately that I really appreciate. First is balance. I feel like when you look at any issue, whether it's an appeal, whether it's what about urban reserves? You really, really look at both sides. You kind of dig in, and maybe not even just both sides. You really look at it from all sides, and before you land on an answer. And that is really apparent to me during appeal deliberations, but other deliberations as well, code amendments, those things. And sometimes that's painful because I think in the appeals, have shown to be really empathetic and towards neighbors when you understand their plight, and yet you're reviewing this within the context of our code and within the appeal. And I've always appreciated the balance that you've given, but also how you've talked to the neighbors about what your role is and how you can look at these things. I've also really appreciated you always making sure that we're letting people know what we're doing, whether it's meeting the code in terms of notice. More than once, I think you've asked, did you do the legal notice? When did you send notice? Did that go out? But not just, those kinds of ways of contacting people, but also, really digging into our public involvement plans and making sure that we're, trying to reach all types of people and community members, and, that we're providing information that people can understand and that we're following the process. And then third, and I think folks will agree, you have been really a champion for housing, and especially housing affordability. Over the last year, I think maybe every meeting you've brought to my attention the Planning Commission bylaws about, trying to facilitate more affordable housing. And I think, the rest of the Planning Commission has heard you, and I think that's something that we're going to be continuing to do, and that will be part of your legacy as well. So those are the three things: kind of balance, public process, and housing affordability, I think are what I really appreciate that you continue to bring up. And I know there's a couple projects that we haven't gotten to yet that have probably been on our work plan your entire tenure, or close there too. And I know that's probably hard too, because we haven't made it completely to zoning transitions or we clearly haven't made it to the university area neighborhood plan. And, there's probably more we can do for housing. And I know that that's probably hard for you to leave knowing that those are undone, but know that you have made really long lasting contributions to the city as a whole. And we also have no doubt that you'll continue to be a familiar face in our processes. I know that you go to city council for a hobby. I have a feeling we'll be seeing you at some future planning commission meetings. And so I just wanted to, on behalf of the staff, just thank you for your service. And we are really going to miss you. So thank you.
I stopped sharing for you, Alyssa, but thank you. That was really, really nice.
So Alyssa, thank you, Alyssa, for that presentation. It was really fantastic. I don't think there's anything any of us could say to top that, but I would like to say that John and I first met from the I-5 bridge project, I'm pretty sure. And I was disappointed that you were not the visual artist by the same name, Borowski, but I got over that quickly. And then we worked together for, decades, and you really recruited me to this position today, John. So I appreciate your steadfast dedication to the city of Eugene, to the betterment of neighborhoods, and in particularly for seeking out people and encouraging them to join in the process of community building, because if you had not been doing that, many of us would not be active today. So thank you, and best wishes. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. It was very humbling. I kind of wish I hadn't looked back and seen all those projects that I'd done. It's a little bit overwhelming. But I would like to, I just jotted down a few things. First, I would like to thank the past commissioners that I worked with: Commissioner Duncan, Mills, Jaworski, Baker, Nicolello, and John Belcher, because coming into the Planning Commission, it's a learning curve, and to learn from some of those people was very, very helpful. They were very knowledgeable and helped plant the seeds. Thanks to staff, I think we've got a great planning staff. I've worked for I've served under 4 different planning directors. There was Lisa, Carolyn, Robin, and now Alyssa. And I think that all of them were great. However, I do think that Alyssa has the tools to take this department and this commission to places that it needs to go, and it has all the tools to get us there. The other staff that they brought on board has been a joy to work with. The younger people have the energy, and it's been really fun to work with them. Thanks to all of you, the current staff. I think we have, or not staff, the current commission. I think that the planning commission that is in place right now is probably one of the most diverse and yet knowledgeable, and has a really great grounding onto where the city needs to go. So I feel very comfortable leaving the process in you guys' hands. Things have changed a lot in the last 8 years. We used to get the AISs in paper printed out to us and sent to us every Thursday. I've got a box that's I've got probably 2.5 feet of AISs in a storage unit right now. Those days are gone. When I got on the planning commission, I think probably one of the main things that we were dealing with was compatibility and how to grow and densify and yet maintain the neighborhoods. And that's something that is still going to be one of the biggest challenges. You know, we did the Envision Eugene process, and that's something that I would hope that every one of the commissioners get a copy of the Envision Eugene booklet and read it, because a lot of work went into that over many years. It was a public engagement process that was very robust. And for me, there's 2 pillars in the Envision Eugene that are very important when it comes to the Planning Commission. And that, you know, that's 4 and 5, and it's promote compact urban development and efficient transportation systems, and protect, repair, and enhance the neighborhood livability. And a lot of times those bump up against each other. And I think it's important that the Planning Commission know that those are 2 very strong things that this community cares about. And making that balance is going to be one of the things that is going to be the hardest thing, especially you know, going into 2001 and doing the things that we're doing today. But knowing that we've got to communicate out to the community that their neighborhoods are still important and their neighborhoods will still be livable. And so I think that's going to be one of the major things that you guys are going to have to deal with in going forward. And then the last thing that I would hope is that this Planning Commission would continue to advocate to the city manager, city council, on behalf of the planning staff. You know, planning staff can do what they can to, you know, get the help that they need by going up through the ranks. But sometimes you've got to go around, you know, you've got to go around the ranks. And that's where you guys, I think, can be helpful. You know, Ken served for a long time on the budget committee and saw police and fire unions come in there and sit in the back of the room and advocate for FTEs. And a lot of times they got them. And planning is something that, in my mind, a lot of people look at planners and planning and say, oh my gosh, we don't like planners. But yet planning touches almost every aspect of our lives in the city. And so I think it's important for you guys, when you're meeting with city councilors, when you're meeting with other people, to advocate for the staff, because they can't really do it for themselves too much. Terry can't go to the mayor and say, I need more staff, right? She's got to go up through the chain and through Denny and those types of things. So we can help them out by advocating for them. So that would be something that I would hope to see from the commission going forward. And with that, I would say thank you for everything. Thanks for the opportunity to serve the council and work with you guys. It's been great getting to know you. I wish it were more in person. And when it goes live, maybe I'll come and sit in the back of the room. So thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Really, it's in shock and denial that you will not be here the next time we meet. So I guess I'll really be shocked at that point. I've got Commissioner Beeson, Commissioner Taylor.
Thanks. And I don't have a lot to add after what Alyssa said. I certainly agree with all that. I guess just really want to say, John, really appreciate your service and appreciated the chance to work with you these last 2 years and learn from you, work with you on the Planning Commission. I've always been impressed. She went through a long list of things, and always impressed with your commitment to public service here in Eugene. Public service here in Eugene. I met you in 2010 when I started on the budget committee, and you were certainly impressive at that time with your knowledge of everything we worked on. So I guess I just really want to say I want to wish you all the best. I don't actually think you're going that far. You're kind of at this point, you're in my mind, you're off to eWeb, and you're really, it's all the city, and you're off to the water and electric side of the house. And I can only imagine after a year or two over there, what kind of things you'll be into. So thanks very much, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Commissioner Taylor.
Well, I have been, and it looks like Bill Randall's here and John Belcher. That's so fun. So I was probably the next one to come on board. So but John and I go back really to neighborhood leader stuff. So I was on the neighborhood board and I kind of worked with John, hoping to get him on the neighborhood board. So I just think the community is lucky to have John Borowski as part of it because of how much, John, you have really dedicated to your volunteer roles. And it's been, as Alyssa noted, plentiful. So I just want to say it's been a pleasure. I've known you a long time. I have great respect for you. And I think your added perspective and dedication has been tremendous for not only the Planning Commission, but like I said, the community. So thank you.
So now we have our great pleasure to have former Commissioner Emeritus Bill Randall lurking in the virtual sidelines here. So Bill, I hope you have something. I hope all the technology works. So we really want to hear what you have to say.
Well, the only part of the technology that isn't working are my earbuds. And so I guess hopefully you can hear me okay. But John, I just wanted to say that I am amazed at your level of commitment over the years. Not only just Planning Commission, but just to our community with Budget Committee and just all the other things you've been involved with. And I know that was the case when I was serving on the commission with you. The other thing is just how prepared you came to every meeting. You just did the deep dive into the AIS and read them all and came prepared and really understood, I think what was going on there. So kudos to you for that. I can't imagine reading all of that and being on Budget Committee and reading all of that and all the other things you were involved in. And so I just was always impressed with that about you. And then I think, this came up earlier, probably the parting thing I would say is just the level of insight that you have and seeing the whole picture. And I think, Alyssa, you mentioned that earlier as far as, being able to see the big picture of the issues that came before us. And I just really appreciate that because I think that's so critical to our community. And, the quote that kind of stuck with me is that, and I think you said this, John, that planning touches every aspect of our community. And I think that's just so true. So thank you for your service. It's been great getting to know you over the past decade, I guess. And I know you're not going far. So thanks again.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I see former Commissioner John Belcher is with us. John, did you want to say something? It'd be great.
Oh, thank you. John, you're the last commissioner I've served with on this panel. That's sort of bittersweet, but it also means you guys don't have to listen to me again anymore at these going away parties. It's all been said, John. You've come prepared. You've able to listen to what other folks have said and incorporate it and bring that back to provide a better solution. I think the one thing that no one's mentioned is that you also brought the unique perspective of, well, three things: being a city wonk, more than most people that I know. Also an ex-neighborhood leader who has very successful negotiations with the university along with Kristen. And then finally, your commercial business experience, which I'm not sure anyone else has had while on the commission, at least when I was here. So that combination created a great planning commissioner, and the city will be bereft for not having you in this role, but I know you're going to go on and continue to do several more. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us also, John. It's terrific to see you again, and thank you for taking time out of your day to help us remember Commissioner Borowski and all his great work. I don't see anyone else who I think I need to call on, but Terry has her hand up, of course. So there are a few steps. All right, so let's start working that way through. Yes.
Yeah, we'll try to be quick, but I would just ask any staff that are on to turn on their cameras, and then I would please ask Sophie, because I know you're so good at this, to take a screenshot once we have everybody's camera on for a little thank you picture. And then I think we do have a couple more people who want to say a few things, but let's get the picture out of the way. Great. I wish I was where Tiffany is. Okay, you ready, Sophie?
Yes, I'm ready. Everybody smile and hold it for a little bit longer than you would think is normal.
It's so awkward. It's a teeny bit less awkward than when I'm in a big room and I yell for everybody to assemble to take a picture, because I'm always that person. But I did want to say one quick thing that hasn't been said to you, John Borowski, which is I admire your community spirit, and I have lots of memories of you reminding staff and the public to consider the impact of our work on both the community and what would happen when things eventually got to the city council. You have that perspective about what's going to happen at the next step and what should we be prepared to be thinking about. But the community example is from my trips to La Perla, where my family would run into you often. And one particular memory I have is the women's basketball team was entertaining some recruits, and there were, all the stars were there, families, coaches, and you went in the back and got a little ball, a little Oregon ball, and gave it to my kids so they could get signatures from the team. And it was so awesome. They have that memory now. And I think that's a real gift that you've given to the community. Over to Rebecca. I think she wanted to.
I did. I am representing ETAC staff because Heather couldn't be here today, and not to gloat, but we're very thrilled that John is remaining on the ETAC because his knowledge and expertise and wealth of understanding is, as everyone has already said, really just an important piece of that committee. And I'm having trouble finding new words because they've all already been said. But it's been really, really beneficial for me as a new city staff person, having you on that committee, reviewing urban reserves, being able to look at it from all sides, bringing your wealth of city and community understanding, really knowing your role and reminding folks about your role on that committee, and just your deep understanding and your good question asking. So we're a little disappointed that you're not going to be on the Planning Commission to help usher growth monitoring and urban reserves through the Planning Commission and asking those important questions, but we're also thrilled that you're going to stay with us on the ETAC because you're an invaluable member. So I just wanted to thank you from both of those perspectives.
Terry, is there anybody else that you're aware of?
Nothing else pre-planned. To everybody, thanks for our surprise guests for coming. That was really great.
Thank you all. It's really fun. It doesn't happen like ever. So it's really great to see everybody.
So Kristen, this means that you're the historian now, and you've got to bring that weight.
Right, right. I might just call you John.
Okay. Are we ready for some metal housing then? All right, great. I'll share my screen and hopefully in a quick fashion. Let's see. Okay, Chair Ramey, would you give me the thumbs up if I'm doing this correctly? All right, thanks. Okay, so welcome to our third and final review of the draft Middle Housing Code language. At today's meeting, we're going to quickly review our project goals, and then we have a speaker from our Community Development Division, the staff team that's working on the housing implementation pipeline. Josh Berman is here. And then we'll go into our draft code language part 3, covering special area zones, adjustment review, and commercial zones with Matt and Kate from Angelo Planning Group. So as a reminder, the overall goals of the Middle Housing Project are to comply with House Bill 2001, to further ongoing work aimed at addressing equity and affordability, and to enable more production and diverse housing types across Eugene. So we've had a lot of speakers come to you from the Equity Roundtable and from the Health and Democracy panel. We've had Patrick Wingard from DLCD come. And today we thought we would have Josh come and talk to you about the connection between the work that you're all doing on the Middle Housing Code amendments and the city's ongoing work on housing. And so Josh, I can't see you, but I need you to tell
I'm
me.
here.
Yep. You want me to stop sharing?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, last minute audible with the slides. So I have a slightly revised version, but I think that you will all be capable of following along. So give me one moment. Let me share that and then put it into presentation view. Okay, can everyone see this?
That's good.
It looks like the full thing, not no slides in the margins. Okay, awesome. So good to see everyone again. Just to remind you, my name is Josh Berman. I work in community development, and I'm working on the HIP, which is the Housing Implementation Pipeline. And I just wanted to give you an update on what's been happening with the HIP and to be able to answer any questions that you may have about how Planning Commission and how planning work broadly fits in with all of this. So just as a refresher, the HIP is going to be a document that we can use to prioritize our work over a 5-year period. And it's going to be written based on the resources available and the directions that we've been given from council. It will lay out our funding sources, establish a working budget for programs over a 5-year period. And it will also be an opportunity for the city to establish new goals and communicate existing goals across the housing continuum, including around homelessness, affordable housing, moderate income housing, and market rate housing, which you can see here on our really lovely housing continuum graphic. So the HIP will look to address City of Eugene policies towards each of those bubbles, from homelessness to market rate housing. And the HIP will also be incorporating and clarifying direction from existing policy documents. So that's our consolidated plan, our TAC report on homelessness, our housing tools and strategies action inventory that we did. And the scope of the document is going to be determined by the City of Eugene's capacity to implement those policy recommendations. So when actually putting this into practice, we know that housing is an issue that cuts across all city departments, which means that we've needed to work across divisions and departments to create a new comprehensive strategic approach. So I kind of circled the offices that we have been working with most. So the departments are planning and development, and that includes community development, which is where I'm at. But also planning staff, as well as building and permitting services. We're working with central services, mainly with the city manager's office, because that's where the bulk of our homelessness efforts and climate efforts are focused, and then also with public works. And so just a couple of notes there. We're working closely with public works because we know that there's an effect that infrastructure and system development charges play on the development of housing. So we wanted to make sure that we were being coordinated with that team with whatever goals we were setting and making sure that we were always on the same page, because that's always a conversation that comes up when it comes to housing affordability. And then another note on climate, that's, hopefully you all know this as planning commissioners, but we really think that good housing policy is good climate policy and vice versa. So we wanted to just make sure that we were taking steps to meet our climate action plan goals and bringing in that perspective throughout the conversation. And the last bit that I wanted to share with you all is about the equity panel that the City of Eugene has recently convened, and talk a little bit more about how the HIP is coming into play there. So the HIP was chosen, and housing broadly was kind of chosen as one of the main conversation topics for the recently convened equity panel. And so the equity panel was created to build off of the first equity panel that was started to look specifically at our climate action plan. And this time around, we have been working with representatives from organizations that represent a broad range of communities focused on equity, with a mix of small grassroots groups as well as larger organizations. So smaller groups include the Lane East Asian Network, and a larger group might be kind of like the NAACP or St. Vincent de Paul. I have the list of organizations if anyone is curious, but we're looking for that really broad range of perspective when we're thinking about equity. In addition to housing, this panel will be addressing transportation, climate action, and housing. So the way that the panel is going to be working is that they will be advising staff on program design and delivery. So we're really asking them to be focused on implementation. It's really hard to tell people that because everyone has a lot of creative ideas, but we're really focused on how can we make our policies better that exist today, or how can we schedule conversations on new policy, but we aren't setting policy within this group. So I just want to be clear about that. And also, we've been very clear with this group, just in the same way with every other community group, we can't guarantee as staff that we'll be able to do everything that is asked for from that equity panel. But we do know that in bringing these folks into the conversation, it will really help us take the needs of marginalized groups into account and really bring that perspective with a lot more detail whenever we go to council or whenever we have to answer to any other kind of like request for information. So we find it like extremely valuable to be able to get this perspective and put it towards the work that we're doing on housing. What does it mean actually? Like, what will they be talking about with the HIP? We've been working to kind of figure that out. And I think that the big thing is that we'll be asking them to help determine the policies that the city should begin to examine in order to reduce housing instability among marginalized communities. So city staff is going to be coming up with initial ideas that have been kind of brought up by either council or other community members or by staff experts that they think will be really effective tools in addressing that inequity. And bringing those ideas to the panel, getting feedback, and ways to ensure that these policies live up to their true potential and reduce gaps for marginalized communities around housing. So with all of that information, we'll be able to include that within the HIP and schedule conversations that we can have with council, where council can then kind of dive a little bit more into the policy and consider whether that policy is right for Eugene. So I'm going to wrap it up there. And, just Terry, I guess I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have about the equity panel or the HIP more broadly? Oh, and I'm raising my hand.
Commissioner Fragola.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Josh. You actually answered a lot of the questions I have when I just saw the one slide in our original document. So thanks for the information. Just for a clarification, this is a different group than the Equity Roundtable. Is that correct? And then my second question is there somebody on the equity panel that is representing and helping to think about renters in Eugene?
So it is different than the equity roundtable, but I think that we are learning a lot of lessons from the roundtable. So we're bringing that with us. But it's a different group and it's structured a little bit differently as well. When it comes to renters, I mean, I will assume that there will be a lot of conversation around that because of the groups that are represented will be advocating for kind of those communities. But separately, there's a Renters Protections Committee that is meeting as part of the Housing Policy Board. And they've been having conversations as well. So the specific topic around renting, I'm sure will come up. But I want to also kind of bring up that there is that separate group. So we'll be looking to both of those to kind of balance out and think about like different policies that we should be examining.
Hey, any other questions for Josh? I don't see any. I'll get back to sharing my screen. Thank you, Josh. That was great. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the rest of the code sections. I'll just remind the commission and the public that's watching that we might extend this meeting past 1:30 if we need to, but we won't if we don't need to. So we'll, I'll hand it over to, I think, Matt, but it could be Kate to walk us through special area zones, adjustment review, and commercials.
I think it's going to be Kate because Kate did most of the work on this one, but I'll be happy to answer questions if I can or help. But yeah.
And Terry, your screen is showing your notes.
Dang it. Okay, hold on.
I know, it's the day.
Thank you for telling me. Is it fixed now? Nope.
No, yeah, we have the slide that you're talking on, and then it shows your next slide with the notes under it. That's what we're seeing.
How about now?
No, no change yet. It's slow though.
Yeah, it's funny. It's switching on my monitors, but I'll just try again.
There you go.
Yeah? Okay, great. Over to you, Kate.
Okay, thank you. And let me know if I have any sound issues. I'm in my basement today, so I have a slightly different AV setup than usual. So if I sound too loud or too quiet, please someone let me know. Okay, so special area zones. We've been kind of talking about these sort of in general terms so far. And now we can finally kind of get into the details and look at how sort of the proposed approach that the Planning Commission has supported for special area zones is being implemented, or at least proposed to be implemented. And so this map and this list on your screen shows the zones that are required to comply with House Bill 2001. And then we are also recommending sort of taking the same approach to the Whitaker special area zone, even though it's not zoned for residential use. It implements a commercial land use designation, but it kind of shares a lot of similar features as the zones that are subject to 2001. So we're sort of recommending a consistent approach there. And as we've talked about going forward, the approach that the Planning Commission and most community members have supported is implementing House Bill 2001 equitably across the city. So that includes kind of taking the same approach in special area zones, and more specifically, generally exempting SAZs from the or excuse me, exempting middle housing from the special area zone development and design standards that are different than the base zones, and instead applying sort of the applicable base zone standards to middle housing. And so that's the approach that you'll see in your draft code packet. And there are just a few exceptions to that approach that we can talk about. So next slide, please, Terry. Thanks. So I'm going to try to quickly go through each of these special area zones, kind of talk about the purpose and what's changed. You'll see that, I mean, the changes are mostly pretty consistent, but it's helpful to kind of look at each one a little more closely. So chambers is the first one. And the purpose statement for the chambers SAZ includes ensuring compatible design for infill development, promoting a mix of residential uses and commercial infill, and creating transitions between higher and lower intensity uses. And there are two sub areas within this special area zone that need to comply with House Bill 2001. So that's the R1 and R2 sub areas. And fortunately, the land use and permit requirements in those sub areas already point to the base zone standards. So no changes are needed to the land use and permit requirements. And then for development standards, the approach would be to exempt middle housing from the special SAZ standards, and also to point to the R1 and R2 base zones. And some of those standards directly conflict with the administrative rules for middle housing. Things like special density standards don't comply with House Bill 2001, and other standards really present pretty significant barriers to middle housing. So things like interior sloped setbacks, special height standards, and alley open space requirements really would make middle housing pretty challenging to develop. So again, exempting middle housing from those standards. So I think unless folks have questions or want to make comments, maybe I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I think we should go through all of them and then break for questions. But let's do a quick sound check. Does anybody need Kate to adjust her microphone? A little bit louder. I'm hearing we want you to be a little bit louder.
Okay, I'm going to move it a little closer to my mouth, but I don't want it to be too close. Yeah. Okay, and I can also just try to talk louder.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to Chase Node. So this one is a little bit different than Chambers. This is intended to be a high density nodal development. And in this zone, the applicable sub areas that are applicable to HB 2001 are the high density residential / mixed use sub area and the high density residential sub area. And so most middle housing uses are already explicitly permitted in Chase Node. So the only change that's needed there is to add cottage cluster as an allowed use. And for standards, many of the special development standards in this special area zone really only apply in the commercial sub area. So there's not a ton of specific development standards that need to be kind of exempted. But there are some standards like exterior building materials and roof pitch requirements. So the proposal is to exempt middle housing from those requirements and defer to the R4 zone, which is obviously a high density residential zone. Okay, moving on to the next one. So downtown Westside. So the purpose includes maintaining the area's residential character and allowing some additional high density residential development in this neighborhood. And again, most middle housing uses are already allowed uses in this special area zone. So the only change needed there is to add cottage cluster. You'll also see in your draft code, there are some other markup changes, including to point to the new development standards that are proposed for middle housing, the special development standards for certain uses. But that's not really a substantive change, it's kind of a notation change. And then in terms of development standards, this zone already points to the R4 zone for most standards, but the SAZ does include some specific development and design standards as well, including things like a minimum landscape requirement, and that does not does not comply with the administrative rules. So again, the proposal is to exempt middle housing from those specific standards. All right, next slide. Elmira Road, this is a very small special area zone that's intended to allow a mix of low density residential uses and a limited range of commercial uses. So in this zone, duplexes and row houses are already permitted, and multifamily, which currently includes triplexes and fourplexes, are only permitted through a planned unit development. So the changes needed there are to add triplex and fourplex, as well as cottage cluster as permitted uses. And also a minor change we're suggesting to the purpose statement to include medium density residential development in addition to low density. And for standards, for development standards, no changes are needed because it already points to the R1 zone. So that one's pretty easy. And Blair Boulevard, historic commercial. So this is a pretty different special area zone because it's actually a historic district, and it implements the historic resource protections under statewide planning goal 5. So because it implements goal 5 resource protections, it's kind of exempt from certain state requirements and some of the administrative rules for middle housing, or at least sort of special exemptions apply. So in historic districts, cities are allowed to continue applying a discretionary review process and discretionary review standards and criteria to middle housing, just as long as those same standards and same procedures apply to single family development. So, currently the allowed uses do include duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Row houses and cottage clusters are not permitted currently, so those would need to be added to the allowed uses. But in terms of standards, because this is a historic district, we're not recommending that middle housing be exempt from these historic standards. They include things like facade articulation in windows and exterior materials. There's a lower height limitation of 2 stories, standards for roof design, landscape design. And these changes are the standards are intended to ensure compatibility with existing historic structures. So given that, we're generally proposing allowing middle housing, but keeping those criteria and standards in place. Okay, next slide. Jefferson Westside. So I included a quote from the purpose statement here. So prevent residential infill that would significantly diminish and encourage residential infill that would enhance the stability, quality, positive character, livability, and natural resources of the encompassed residential areas. So in Jefferson Westside, the section defers to the R2 zone for land use and permit requirements. So again, once the R2 zone is updated for compliance, then no changes are needed here. And then, as we've talked about a little bit in previous meetings, the development and design standards in the Jefferson Westside zone are pretty out of compliance with HB 2001 and the administrative rules. And also, where they're not out of compliance entirely, they create pretty significant barriers to middle housing. So things like requirements for a maximum number of dwellings per lot, which effectively establishes larger minimum lot sizes than what the OARs allow, and some similar standards to what's in the Chamber's SAZ regulating things like interior sloped setbacks and lower height restrictions, and some rather convoluted standards for parking access and things like that. So the approach for Jefferson Westside is to exempt middle housing from the development and the lot standards, and to point to the R2 standards instead. All right, next one, please. So Royal Node, again, this is a nodal development, and it allows for a pretty wide range of uses and densities. And there are 7 different sub areas that implement that sort of range of uses and densities. And there's three sub areas that are subject to HB 2001. It's the low density medium density residential and the residential mixed use subareas. So like some of the other zones, most middle housing is already permitted in Royal Node. So the only change needed there is to add cottage cluster to the list of permitted uses. And for development standards, there are some pretty detailed design standards for things like building orientation, windows, facade materials, porches, roof pitch, things like that. And so the proposal is to exempt middle housing from these standards and instead point to either the R1 or the R2 zones. Those are the comprehensive plan designations that sort of match up with that area. And I should point out that a lot of the topics that are addressed in the SAZ standards are addressed maybe in a slightly different way, but are addressed in the new special standards for middle housing that's proposed to be added to the code. That's what we talked about at the last work session. And so that, that addressed things like building orientation and window coverage, facade articulation to some extent. So even though, middle housing will be exempt here, those standards will still apply. And then our last SAZ is Whitaker. So again, Whitaker is not required to allow middle housing under HB 2001, but the purpose statement includes saying it allows a mix of residential dwellings, and most middle housing is already permitted. So it seems to make sense to just kind of increase the flexibility in this special area zone, similar to some of the other zones. So in terms of uses, all that's needed is to add cottage cluster. And for standards, it currently points to the C2 commercial zone for residential development standards. So the only change that's needed here is to exempt middle housing from the lot area standards, because those are a little more restrictive than what is allowed in the base zone standards. So this would point to the R4 lot standard. So for things like lot, or I guess specifically for lot area, minimum lot area. And that's our last SAZ. So I guess I'll pause there and see if folks have questions or thoughts.
Any commissioners have thoughts or questions on these proposals? Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, if you could just refresh my memory. I think I asked this at a previous meeting, but the Walnut Station mixed use zone, you said it didn't need to be included, but as I recall, there's steps, slope setbacks, and those types of things that are incorporated in some areas, obviously, like adjacent to 15th and stuff like that. Can you tell me again why we're not looking at Walnut mixed use in these standards?
So I will make a first attempt, and then I'll welcome either Matt or Jeff to answer too. But so Walnut Station doesn't need to comply with House Bill 2001 because it's not a residential land use designation, and it's kind of a form-based code approach to design and development standards. And I think the idea is that because middle housing, or because it doesn't need to comply with House Bill 2001, and the sort of form-based, it didn't make sense to exempt middle housing from the form-based standards when those kind of apply equally to all housing types. And I would also say that my understanding is that Walnut Station is generally intended for higher density, sort of mixed use and residential multifamily development. So it's probably not likely to see as much middle housing, maybe as some of the other special area zones. I don't know, Matt or Jeff, feel free to jump in if I'm getting any of this wrong.
I agree with what you said, Kate. I think that's completely right. And it's really just, it's one of the few special area zones that sets out a nearly form-based code. So it seemed counterintuitive to exempt the middle housing in that area since it's not required under the state law.
So let me ask a hypothetical then. So let's say some of the properties that are north of Franklin, like on Garden Way, there's still some single family houses in there. If they wanted to do a duplex, triplex, quad on those, would it be permitted? And would they be able to actually do those using the form-based code? Because the form-based code is going to prohibit, in a lot of places, building those types of houses on those types of lots.
That's a great question. I will make sure that we go back and ensure that we're not potentially prohibiting any level of development in that way, and report back to the Planning Commission on that at a later date. Because I'm just, without actually spending the time looking at code while everybody's watching me read it, I don't want to say something incorrect about that special area zone.
Thank you.
So I have a question. It's a comment that might lead to a question. The comment is using the term exempt has always been a little confusing to me. And it sounds like you're exempting the standards, and I guess what I'm worried about is the implication is that anything goes. It's like, okay, we're just going to let it happen here. And whereas I think it might be more accurate to say when standards are in place that conflict with these housing types, we're replacing them with the standards that apply to the housing types. And I don't know if that's only an issue for us as we look at the language, or when we get into line by line in the code, that'll be more clear. But the concept of exempt, I think, has always been a little confusing to me.
Yeah, I think we've generally combined the word exempt with defer to or point to the base zone standards from R1, 2, 3, or 4. And that's really what we're doing. I mean, I don't know that we're saying that in those zones, middle housing would not have to comply with the standards in those zones for certain things. Instead, they would have to comply with the base zone standards. And we can change up, I think, how we describe that, or we don't have to use that word exempt. But I think the more important thing is that those other base zone standards would apply. So it's not, we don't want to give people the impression, that anything goes, because that wouldn't be the case.
Right, that's what, I just wanted to be sure we hadn't, anyway. To me, I've always a little uneasy about the word exempt. Okay.
And I'll just follow up on that and add that the design standards that we're proposing to mostly adapt from the model code will also apply in the special area zones, in addition to the base zones.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to say that. I mean, that's what I get worried about. Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. Again, so I think this is one area where the communication is going to be key, because all of these special area zones had a robust public process in developing them. And the neighbors that worked on developing these things said, this is the way we want our neighborhood to look. These are the standards that we think will make it livable and what we want to see in future development for our area, whether it's Jefferson Westside, Royal Node, Whitaker. A lot of people have used these plans and these things to think of this is how our neighborhood or our city is going to develop in this particular area. And now we're taking those design standards and saying that they don't apply. And so getting that communication out there is important. Not that the planning staff is saying those things don't apply, or the planning commission is saying those things don't apply. We are doing our best to comply with House Bill 2001, which tells us that we need to allow these types of housing. And in your plan, we couldn't build them there. And so we're doing our best to make sure that we comply with the state law and allow these types of housing to the best of the ability within your plan. So that's going to be the thing that's out there, because I mean, we all saw it. There was something sent to our email box that said the planning division and staff and the realtors are taking away your neighborhoods, right? And that's going out to the public. So we need to make a concentrated effort to get out there and let them know that we're doing what we can under the state law. It's the same thing that we have when we have an appeal. You know, it's like, I hear what you're saying, but I've got to follow the code or the law. And so getting that communication out there in the right way, I think, is going to be one of our most important things in bringing this middle housing codes home.
Commissioner Fragola.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. We're not doing away with special area zone standards. They are still going to apply to single family home development, correct? I see everybody shaking their head. So the special area zone standards still exist. They're still being utilized. They're still guiding development, but we're exempting middle housing from those special area zones when they are in conflict with HB 2001 and when they are barriers to creating more diverse housing types in our community. So I agree with Commissioner Borowski. I think it's really important that we communicate that, and we are not doing away with anything. Those special area zones still exist and still are being implemented and utilizing the standards for lots of development that will happen.
Great, that was a great summary. Not seeing any other questions about special area zones. Are we ready to move on to adjustment review? Okay. Attempted to share this already a little prematurely, so hopefully it's ready to go. And here's the adjustment review slide for you, Kate.
Great, thanks, Terry. So adjustment review, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, but it is an optional discretionary process that allows some additional flexibility for specific development standards. And generally the code identifies the places where adjustments are permitted, and also has pretty specific review criteria for approving adjustments to those standards. And the purpose statement for adjustment review includes encouraging design proposals that respond to the intent of the code and creatively meet or exceed the specific development standards. So generally allows proposals that are consistent with the purpose of the standards, but where the applicant wants to kind of go about meeting those in a different way, or maybe has trouble meeting the development standards as they're written. So in the new section that is proposed for special standards for middle housing, most of those standards are adjustable. There are kind of a handful of standards that we are proposing to not allow adjustments for. So things like the maximum building footprint for cottage clusters of 900 square feet, because that is dictated by House Bill 2001. But most of the design standards like entry orientation, common courtyard design standards, things like that are generally open for adjustment. So I'll caveat this by saying, your packet includes some draft adjustment criteria for all the standards that are adjustable. And I think right now they're just a little bit broad and they're a little bit kind of open-ended. And so over the next couple of months, the project team will continue working to refine these criteria, and especially trying to add some more specific numeric thresholds to make it a little easier for staff to review the proposals and to decide when an adjustment is appropriate and when the applicant meets the criteria. So Terry, if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, you're already there. So yeah, this is just a list of the standards, the new design standards for middle housing that are adjustable. So I won't read through this list, but maybe if you want to just stay on that slide, if folks have any comments or questions about any of these now.
Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, just to again, it's my last meeting, so I'm going to get as much in here as I can. So a couple of questions. So adjustment review will be a planning director's decision, correct? And it's appealable. Is that also correct? Okay. So this is where I think it's really important that you guys look at this list of things and decide if it really needs to be an adjustment review or if we can bake it into the code. Because if it's something that's easy and makes sense and adds flexibility, like Commissioner Taylor always stresses, if we can bake it into the code, that's going to help out. Because if it goes to adjustment review and somebody doesn't like the fact that they're putting this in there, they can throw it. It'll go to the planning director, and then it'll go into an appeal process, which adds time, money, and those types of things. So I think it's really important that you guys dig into these in the future and say, no, let's just figure out what row house driveway access should be, and try and make the things that need to be reviewed as small as they can, so that we get to where we want to be here. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay, anyone else? Thoughts on this? Yeah, that's exactly right, Commissioner Borowski. And when we get the details of this, I think we'll all be digging into it to be sure these are necessary.
Just to clarify, Terry, they've received the draft code language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the detail, I mean, we've provided you as much detail as we have available so far.
In other words, well, thank you for that. So we have the detail.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, Kate. I mean, honestly, I'm not diving into the detail. I'm looking at it at a very high level just because I know things are still moving. If that's something you want us to change in terms of providing ultimate support right now, I know Terry had said we can follow up kind of behind the scenes outside the meeting if we have specific feedback now. But I just wanted to reiterate that it's there. I'm reviewing it, but I'm not getting into code analysis yet or looking at those details yet. So if you want us to shift, you just let me know, but I'm kind of waiting until it's very clear that we've now moved from this higher level review of all the elements. Thank you.
I guess I have a quick response to that, and that is, this is the opportunity to provide as much specificity as you can in terms of direction to staff to prepare the adoption package. So if, for instance, the majority of the planning commission thought that this list was too long and we shouldn't be allowing adjustments on this many things, we would take a look at that and try to bring you the best set of code with fewer adjustable standards than this. But this is the working recommendation of the project team for standards that could be adjusted. And again, the standards that we have incorporated it or worked into the code follow the direction on each topic that we've heard from you. This would be where, for some reason, it's not possible for a developer or property owner to meet those expectations that we've set out as desirable.
So I just want to clarify that I agree with. So I think this, as Commissioner Borowski said, I think I agree with what he said. So definitely I'll be kind of doing that more detailed kind of check and balance once we get all the parts and pieces, because they're still moving a bit. But I think this captures, I think Kate and Matt did a great job. I think this captures what we've been talking about. I like the flexibility of adjustment reviews. I think the code language is generally kind of getting at both the flexibility and concerns the communities might have or neighbors might have. So yeah, I think it captures it. Okay, thanks.
So I think just to sum up a little bit, the fewer items that are needed or available to be adjusted, the better for the process. However, that's within the context of design generally. So we look to you as the staff and the consultants to make the shortest list with the clearest goals, what's the criteria, clearest criteria possible, because that benefits everybody in the long run.
Thank you. That's a great summary. And just one note I would make about that is that, for instance, in some of the developer focus groups, we heard about odd sized lots or, unique circumstances. But what we're trying to do is provide a balance between expectations that apply to everyone and specific opportunities to adjust that if there's some unique circumstance. So I think making everything flexible would be amiss because it wouldn't incorporate the standards that you've all talked about having baked into the code. So I hope that's a fair summary. Okay, great. Well, we're making great progress. We have one more slide here to talk through, and that's commercial zones. Back to you, Kate.
All right. And this one should be pretty quick. So commercial zones, of course, are not subject to House Bill 2001. They're not zoned for residential use, but some changes are mostly needed for consistency in terms of, the terms that are used. So for multifamily, that's being sort of redefined to exclude triplexes and fourplexes. And those housing types are generally already permitted in commercial zones. So not a lot of changes are needed in terms of which uses are and are not permitted. And actually, so, we thought about whether cottage clusters should be permitted in commercial zones. And we decided that it maybe didn't make sense to permit cottage clusters just because they're not, when you think about, they're really small single family homes, essentially. And, when you think about commercial zones, it just seemed to be a less compatible use with commercial uses and, higher density multifamily. So that was the decision we made. Welcome feedback on that, or the recommendation that we're making, I should say. And in terms of development standards, really no changes are needed or recommended. The only one change that we are proposing is to exempt middle housing from the special standards that apply within the Jefferson Westside special area zone, just to be consistent with the portions of the SAZ that are required to comply with HB 2001. So that's it.
Yeah, I can stop sharing for any questions on commercial zones.
Mr. Borowski.
So when we're talking about commercial zones, we're talking about all commercial zones. And what I'm thinking is there's neighborhood commercial zones, neighborhood commercial that may not be developed right now as commercial, that actually may be developed with housing. And do we want to exempt cottage clusters from all commercial zones? It's just a question out there. I know that, my restaurant is in a neighborhood commercial zone, but yet there are single family houses. I wouldn't mind seeing two of the houses that are adjacent to me being turned into a cottage cluster. I don't know. It's just a question of, when we think of commercial zones overall, I think, oh, this is, Franklin Boulevard, this is office, this is retail, this is high story, this is mixed use. But there is also neighborhood commercial that is underdeveloped as commercial. And I'm just asking, do we have to take it out of all the commercial zones at once, or can we parse it out?
Go ahead, Kate.
I was just probably going to say the same thing as you, which is, of course, there's no reason that you have to do this, take the same approach to all commercial zones if you wanted to make decisions for each zone specifically.
Commissioner Fragola.
I was having the same exact thought as Commissioner Borowski, in that I feel like there are some areas in the city that would be amendable to cottage clusters, and that it doesn't make sense to exempt it in all commercial areas. maybe they wouldn't get built, but that would be up to a developer to make a decision if it was worth investing in that model. And I wouldn't want to create a barrier to it necessarily. And I definitely, think there's a difference in it, like in, some of the more heavily developed industrial commercial type zones. But the one that came to mind to me specifically was the commercial neighborhood zone. And so I guess I would support what Commissioner Borowski just identified as a possible area for making some changes here.
And I can say that this is actually one item on today's agenda that I had to think about for a minute, because I wasn't sure. I'm always a little nervous about making special exceptions and understanding why that is. So this one certainly caught my attention, and hearing this conversation, I think there was a reason for that. So at least 3 of us, I think, would be interested in bringing this topic. And I don't want to paraphrase right. Are we saying open it to all commercial zones, or are we saying some of the commercial zones that involve less intense development? And maybe Commissioner Taylor can help us out of this.
I think in order to meet state inventories and kind of be consistent with our comp plan, envision Eugene, I would not, as Kate said, cottage clusters by kind of character. If you look at what we've been talking about in terms of what will inevitably be kind of adopted code, I don't think this is really appropriate for C2, C3, et cetera. C1, as Commissioner Fragla and Commissioner Borowski brought up, I think I can see the potential, although C1 has area restrictions in terms of the actual, those sites tend to be quite small. So I guess my question for Planning Commission is, C1 has an objective. If you read the purpose and intent of C1, do we want it to then be developed as cottage clusters? I mean, it is serving a purpose. And if we're going to have housing, personally, I'd like it to be a little bit denser than a cottage cluster. So I guess I just need to think about it a little bit further, but I would not support a cottage cluster in anything maybe other than C1, but I'd like to think about it a little bit further. And I had the same, I didn't have that thought because it seemed kind of made sense to me in terms of Kate and Matt's recommendation. But I'm not saying I'm not open to looking closer to C1.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. I kind of had the same thought as Commissioner Taylor. I think that while I'm supportive of someone who wants to take a single family home that happens to be in a commercial zoning right now and wants to convert that or wants to increase housing, but I think that over time, if the idea is to convert those single family homes into commercial businesses and whatnot, because that's sort of the way that they've been planned. I'm kind of torn there because I do want to see that conversion versus having someone come in and build a cottage cluster and buy and forego something that could be more dense. So I just want to put that out there that I'm actually I'm challenged a bit because I do support the increase of housing and middle housing, but I also think that we need to be strategic about where we're putting it. And there's reasons that the zoning has been established the way that it is. So I guess I want to hear from the community. And I know that this whole process is getting us to a public hearing, but I do think that these are the kind of important things to try to sift through because I actually feel a little bit mixed on this issue. So thanks.
Commissioner Beeson.
I'd be supportive of looking at this for C1. As I've listened to the discussion, I think I'm in agreement with Commissioner Taylor, Commissioner Edwards, Commissioner Fragola. It does strike me we're at the end of June. This is, I think, we're having a meeting here, and then we're going to go. I know we're going to talk about schedule here in a bit, but in August, you're going to bring back a draft implementation package, which includes final draft or a draft, I guess, of the proposed amendments. And it would seem like whatever it is we're thinking of today is going to need to be put together in a little more detail by staff. I'm looking at Terry's box here, staring at her. I think it's a good idea. I think it's something we ought to look at. For me, it would be good to have some more detail about what that would look like and what the language would be and how it would fit in.
I see your hands, all of you. I'm gonna let Commissioner Isaacson in here because he hasn't had yet, and then it'll be Borowski and Taylor.
I'm also open to it in C1. I guess my only thought is that it's kind of a broad brush, and I would think that to a certain degree the market is going to decide for each particular parcel whether cottage clusters or something more denser would be more appropriate. So I'm open to having that conversation about making it more broad, but I'd want to hear more of the argument.
Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I just brought this up. I brought up C1 as an example, and C1 is it's a quandary because C1 is zoned to put the infrastructure in place that is needed to support our 20-minute neighborhoods, right? You want the small market, you want the restaurant, you want the amenities that C1 affords a neighborhood. Now, the only reason that I was bringing it up is because duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes are already permitted on that land. So if there's land that people are going to put a quadplex on, to me, putting a cottage cluster makes as much sense, for those. So to exempt it, but then again, if a cottage cluster is going to take the place of a neighborhood amenity that could be used as commercial, there's your Sophie's choice. So I just wanted to put it out there that if we're allowing duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and row houses in all zones, to say that the cottage clusters aren't permitted in the neighborhood C1 areas that may never be developed commercially, but may be developed residentially. That was the only argument that I was making.
Kate, I'm going to let you in here ahead of Commissioner Taylor.
Thanks. Yeah, I had to look back at the code to refresh my memory, but under the current code, all residential dwellings in the C1 zone are only allowed if the ground floor is used for commercial or non-residential use. So it's a little confusing because it says, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes are permitted, but they're really not truly, it's really, 2, 3, or 4 units above a commercial or other non-residential space. So I think if we wanted to permit cottage clusters, we would have to, exempt those from that requirement and think about whether that makes sense given the limitations on other types of quote unquote middle housing that's not truly middle housing if it's really part of a mixed use development.
Okay, I will say that's fascinating. So now I've got Matt in line too. All right, you guys. All right, Commissioner Taylor, you first.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I had to go back to the code to kind of remind myself as well. I think it's kind of that catch-22. If we allow cottage clusters and exempt them from the commercial on the bottom floor, then we've got to relook at duplexes, triplexes, and quads. So I just think going back to also the other thing to remember, and I don't know if Alyssa and Terry there's a lot of C1 because it's a floating zone. Remember, it's not actually a designation within the metro plan. So it's often a zone sitting on a different designation. It's sitting on a residential designation. So if there was a real desire to do residential, you could just rezone it consistent with the comp plan. So, and it's not all C1, but there's a lot of C1. And I guess if Planning Commission was interested, maybe Terry or Alyssa could get an understanding of what that number is. But I still stay in, I guess I like what Kate and Matt so far have proposed. Thank you.
Okay, Matt.
I was going to note the same thing that Kate noted, and also just I looked at the purpose statements for your different commercial zones, and I think in just looking at the purpose statements, C1's meant to be applied to smaller commercial areas. It's meant to serve the needs of the surrounding neighborhood, not so much larger areas, commercial needs. I mean, of any of them, it seems to me like the one place where you might want to think about allowing cottage clusters. The other commercial zones, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. So I think I would kind of echo what a lot of you already said already from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and looking back on it now, it just said that the slide came up and said that duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and row houses were permitted in commercial zones, and we just found out that it's not permitted in all commercial zones. It's obviously not permitted in C1. So if I wouldn't have started, I wouldn't have gone down this rabbit hole had I dug into the code. And I knew that. I should have known that. I'm sorry.
And I could have made that clearer as well, for sure.
Mr. Taylor, I see your hands up. No. Okay. So we've gone around this pretty big circle here. Who started this? Was it you, Commissioner Borowski? So can you sum up where you think we are at this point?
I don't have any problem with the designation going forward. I think I would make it clear that C1 isn't part of allowing the other mixed middle housing, just in the presentation.
Okay, I thought that satisfies me. Commissioners Fregolette and Beeson, you were sort of somewhere along the line here. Are you guys okay with where we are? Yes?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yes, okay. So, well done.
Okay.
No change.
Yes, thank you. These are really helpful conversations, even if we end up right where we started, because as you've all noted a couple of times, we're going to be entering a public review process, and we'll need to work on communicating the direction that's been given by the Planning Commission, as well as the various project team recommendations and their rationale. So this is all really helpful to us. So on your screen is our next step slide, and I see your hand, Kristen. Let me just talk through this and then I'll stop again. After this meeting, we're going to meet as a team and also meet with our Planning Commissioner resources, which is 3 of you, to kind of distill everything that we've done over the last several meetings and work on pulling it together into an adoption package. And then as Ken said earlier, we'll bring it back to you in a draft form in August, probably early August, because as complete as we can get it, we'd like to get it in that as good a shape as possible to send notice up to the state 6 weeks ahead of your planned public hearing. And we're looking for dates in late September right now. The idea is that we'd hold that public hearing and then hold several deliberation sessions with the commission for you to form your official recommendation to the city council, and then bring it to the city council at the earliest in November. All of this is leading to a state implementation deadline of June 30th of next year. And that's what we're working towards, really, really hard and really quickly. I really appreciate all of the thoughtfulness that you all are providing us as we work our way through the different parts. And Kristen, you might be the, and then Commissioner Beeson. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for you, Terry, Alyssa. I thought it was really helpful, the process and clear and objective, how there were community members that are users of the code to actually be able to be they contributed a significant amount of work. Actually, I'm super grateful of just looking through, reviewing. Do you have a similar objective of doing that with this code?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, we can absolutely look at that.
Great.
Commissioner Beeson.
Well, having heard that, I think that's a good idea too. I guess I want to just drill down a little bit on that next step slide that you had up, and particularly what's going to happen here over the next couple of months. And I'm also going back to some of the discussion we had a few minutes ago about the level of detail that people are going through now and doing review and giving comments. Appreciate we're all coming from some different levels of experience here. So it's end of June. You're going to, in July, put together this draft implementation package. And on that slide, I'm trying to, I know you kind of put a bunch of marks in there that show planning commission meetings ahead of the public hearing. Here's what I guess I'm kind of wondering, and you can try to stay maybe general in the answer. I guess what I'm wondering about in terms of our process, you're going to go to work and then you're going to give us about a month from now, you're going to give us another draft version of the amendments. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have, are you envisioning that in those next planning commission work sessions, we're going to be then going into the necessary detail that's kind of been referred to in these discussions we've been having, the drill down or whatever people call it, so that we end up with a draft set of amendments that are going to go out to the public in advance of the public hearing? I'm trying to get a grasp on what you're envisioning, Terry, for what that package is going to look like in terms of, and I know it's all in draft and it stays in draft all the way through the council public hearing, and people can continue to weigh in, and we want that. Can you talk about a little bit about what you're looking for from us over the next month or month and a half, and how we provide that input and so on? Thanks.
Sure, I'd be happy to, but Jeff has his hand up, so I'm going to let him go first.
Okay.
So it's just, it would be my recommendation to the Planning Commission at this point to, you have a full set of the draft code to the last three AISs. I would be going off of those drafts, making notes within that level of detail, because when we enter that code adoption process, you're going to not only have the code at that point, but you're also going to have a series of other pieces of materials that we're going to need to be reviewing simultaneously. So I think it would be in this period in between now and when we bring that code to you in August, to be really familiar, have those detailed comments. We will note any changes that have been made from where we are now to moving into the future based on the guidance that you've given us so far. So I think, for at least from my perspective, I think that would be the most useful, would be using the draft you currently have. Terry, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that sounds great. The only thing I would add, and Jeff really has the detailed working knowledge of the code more so than I do, but the way that I've been thinking about this is that we want to, as you were saying, Ken, hear from the public. And I think there's a certain point where we want to reflect the discussions the commission has had, but not go so far as to pick something where we might still have questions or options that we want to put out to the public for their review. And so that's kind of the spirit that we're using to guide us in this pre-adoption process that we've been going through. We're really getting into the details, but it's in the spirit of what direction are we taking this code? What things are we trying to allow? What things are we trying to incentivize and encourage based on all the public input that we've gathered? How do we prioritize equity in our code choices? So those are the questions that are guiding us. But I think Jeff's exactly right. We have provided all of the middle housing related code amendments in draft form to you over the last 3 meetings. There are a couple other pieces like amendments to make the Metro Plan consistent and things to implement the Senate Bill 458. Things like that we're not done with, and we have to bring those to you as well. But it's not going to be something totally different or that you haven't seen before based on this iterative process of building and reflecting and refining that we've been through. So do others have questions about that?
Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at the timeline as well. And I'm again, this is one of the perspectives that I was lauded on earlier. The next level that we're going to with these code amendments, and that's City Council, and how to land this at City Council. Okay, so I'm looking at, you guys have a public hearing in September. You have a couple meetings. You have a public hearing in September, and then 3 meetings to dig down and deliberate on it. And then what's on the schedule is 1 meeting before City Council's public hearing at City Council, and a couple after. And just from seeing the way these types of things have gone in the past, that's when the advocates for or against any parts of these codes are going to be inundating the City Council. So if it would be my recommendation that if you could get in front of City Council more than once before their public hearing to make sure there are any questions that they have, that will help to alleviate the last minute writing code at a 45-minute work session, which we've seen before on these types of things. You know, we dig into it. The last time we were lucky enough on Fair and Objectives that they didn't change the code on us. They said, go back and send it back to Planning Commission, which I think is absolutely appropriate. But I can see this one being, you know, the City Council being lobbied heavily in certain areas on this. And if we can answer those questions before the public hearing or shortly after the City Council's public hearing, I think that will help land this. Just some parting wisdom.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Great. Well, I didn't have another slide. I do have the adoption phase timeline, but I don't think we need to show it again. You've seen it before, it hasn't changed. And it's only 1:17. So we actually have time for Planning Commission items and items from staff, if you can believe it. I think we're done. We have what we need from you. Thank you very, very much. And you can think of anything else. Matt, Kate, you guys have been awesome. Couldn't have done this without you. And we might just be calling you up.
Yeah, you know where we are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think we can handle it. Back over to you, Alyssa.
I do have some staff updates. Let's just real quick, your next couple of meetings, you have one not until July 13th, giving you a little break. And that will be a workshop on land acknowledgements. And that has come out of your retreat from earlier this year. And then on July 26th, we have penciled in an update on the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan. And then as Terry mentioned, early August, you'll be back with middle housing. And we are still we're calendaring for this fall because we'll have a number of projects, not just middle housing, that are hitting the adoption process. So urban reserves eventually here, and then eventually River Road will also be coming back to you again this fall. Let's see, just in terms of schedule, at council, actually, so ADUs will be back to council on July 12th. They have a work session and possibly action on the most recent remand. And then the commercial setbacks code amendment that you all provided a recommendation on. The public hearing at council is also in July on the 19th. And then, as I mentioned to you in an email, the council did make an appointment for a new planning commissioner, and I touched base a bit with him, Thomas, and we'll be onboarding him before his his first meeting in July. So he's clear on his role and legal requirements, and we'll also need to be onboarding him on all of the specific projects. Clearly, you guys have a lot of information that you're going to be ahead of him on, so we'll have to give some fire hose treatment there. The good news is that the 2 Tuesday night meetings a month works for him. So as I mentioned, I was waiting to hear from him before we made that official, but I'm letting you know now that starting in September, your regular meetings are going to be the 2nd and 4th Tuesday nights. So we will drop the Monday 11:30 with the caveat that if we need to, we often pull you for meetings when we need to throw in another meeting, often for appeals or deliberation. So there's a possibility that, a daytime meeting could come up again, but not as your regular meeting. And the question just keeps coming up, so I'm just going to mention it every time until I have an actual update. But we don't have plans to go back to in-person meeting. What we're doing, it doesn't mean we won't. It's just that I'm waiting to see and let the council take the lead on that, because they're trying to figure out how to do hybrid meetings so that, say if somebody's out of town, they could still participate on the planning commission, because that's been actually working out really great for us here. And also the public could participate remotely if needed. So we're going to make sure that technology is working at the council level. They can figure out those bumps for us, and then we can, make it work for us as well. And I think that is all I have. Let's see. Yeah, that is all I have. Unless, I'd love to hear if Commissioner Borowski has any more parting advice for us.
Absolutely. The City Council will be holding a public hearing this evening to talk about the supplemental budget and the 2022 adopted budget. And there would be a great opportunity for anybody who cares to advocate for any particular funding sources. That is an appropriate time to talk to the City Council about those things. It's at 7:30 this evening, and I don't know if anybody will be there, but I might be talking to them on a couple of things. So there you go.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thanks, Chair Ramey. First of all, I want to apologize to everybody. I am on vacation this week, and so I was trying to make an effort to be here, and I've had a lot of issues with my connection, so I'm calling in by phone, and that seemed to be the best way. But I did want to say, because I had a terrible connection when folks were speaking about Commissioner Borowski. I just wanted to tell everybody that John has been like my Yoda on the Planning Commission and on ETAC and on LGAC and all the other things that he and I share our volunteer time on, and he's just been really incredible. So John, I just want you and the rest of the world to know how very much I appreciate your encouragement and your wisdom, and I'm going to continue to call you and bug you and get your insights. So you won't be able to get rid of me that easily. So, but best wishes in eWeb. We'll miss you.
Any other updates from commissioners? Okay, well, I think we can adjourn this meeting. John, once again, thank you so much for all your work, and you're not really going to lose us. We'll still be around, and we know where you are, so we'll come talk to you. Everybody else, have a good summer, stay cool, and we'll see you on July 13th.